I am so excited to finally be here. 3 years is a long time to get somewhere. I mean, 100 years ago by wagon train, that's how long it would have taken, but it's modern day and I finally made it. Okay, so I move around a lot. You need to understand that. I was a junior high teacher, as I said before. If I sat behind the desk, then kids would pass notes, so I always wandered around. But you guys are grown-ups. You can pass all the notes you want. It's all good. Yes, I was in politics. I'm going to give you a little more background. I grew up in a small town, and when I graduated from high school, there were 1,200 people in that community. Now, when I was growing up there, everyone always said, almost explicitly, that you only had 3 choices in life. You could go into oil and gas, which Alberta has a lot of oil and gas. I mean, we have the 3rd largest proven reserves of oil in the world. If you wanted to make money, it's great. If you didn't care about money, but you still liked hard work and some nostalgia, you became a farmer. And if you were smart, I mean school smart, you went to high school and you got good grades, then you didn't do either of those things. You went off to university and you never came home. And they actually looked at you if you went to university and got a degree and came back, like, oh, you weren't strong enough, eh? You failed. You couldn't get it, couldn't hack it out there. That's why you came back. And so I was in grade 12, honor student, and I went off to university. Now, I was going to go to law school. And then I realized I didn't want to be a lawyer. But no offense to lawyers, I just didn't want to be one. I got an honors degree in philosophy, right? And I didn't want to go to law school, so I came back to the farm, and what else was I going to do with an honors degree in philosophy? I fed cows. We had 200 head of purebred Black Angus, 400 commercial cows, horses, and we did some grain farming too, so it was good. But then I realized I needed a job to subsidize my ranching habit. So I got an education degree, I became a junior high teacher, and now I made enough money to buy more horses and to buy more cows. And life was great. I actually lived in one community, I ranched in another one, and I taught in another one, all half an hour from each other. I thought life is perfect. I got to teach kids all day, which is what I love to do. I got to ride my horse in the evenings, and I got to work cattle on the weekend. Who wouldn't want that? And then I realized all 3 of the communities I was in were dying. I mean, their main streets were looking decrepit and decaying. There were more and more vacant buildings. Businesses were closing. Housing prices were going down. Young people were leaving. Semi-retirees were leaving. Professionals were leaving. Everybody was going. And all 3 communities' populations were declining. So I did what any respectable person would do, and I shot my mouth off about the need for a rural community development strategy for the province of Alberta. And I shot my mouth off one too many times, which is how I wound up in politics. If you ever want into politics, just keep talking. And if you ever want out of politics, just keep talking. It's the same rule for both. So I wound up in politics, and I had lots of great jobs. I mean, we call them ministers. Like a cabinet minister. I know you guys don't have that here. I actually realized a lot of people don't understand that because I was in a cab, and a taxi cab, and a gentleman, the guy driving the taxi cab, said, "What do you do?" And I said, "I'm a minister." And he talked about how amazing the job was that I did, how much I helped people, how responsible it was for me to do something like that. And then when I stopped at the airport and I went to pay him, he said, no, I can't take money from a man of the cloth. And I was like, no, I'm in a cabinet minister, not... So I just did this and got out of the cab. So I realize lots of people don't know, but I had lots of amazing jobs. I even ran for what would be the equivalent of governor. I'm glad I lost, but I had a lot of amazing jobs. But the first job I ever got was to write a rural community development strategy for the province of Alberta. And I was really excited. So I got in my truck and I drove all over Alberta, 422 communities. I went to over 200 of them in 2 years, and I wrote a report called Rural Alberta, Land of Opportunity. And in that report, there were 72 recommendations. They covered health, education, community infrastructure, economic development, youth, seniors, tourism, arts and culture, water, wastewater infrastructure, and housing. And everyone said, what a great report. I even had someone come up to me at a convention and say, this is like the rural Bible. This is everything we need to do. I love this. And I was so excited. And then the premier, you guys call him a governor, or her a governor, said, go tell everyone about it. So I traveled around again, telling everybody what they needed to do about health, education, community infrastructure, economic development, youth, seniors, tourism, arts and culture, water, wastewater infrastructure, and housing. And they all said, fantastic. And then I realized I had this significant problem. See, everyone would look at me and say, this is a great idea, but I watched people do the exact opposite of what they just said they were going to do. And then that's when I had my second epiphany. See, my first epiphany came when I was a junior high teacher. I would go talk to high school students about how to be successful in life. And it was a pretty simple presentation. I get up at the front and go, study hard, don't do drugs, marry someone nice. And they'd all look at me like, my mom told me that this morning. But none of them changed what they were doing. So I changed my presentation. I walked into the classroom one day, I looked at the front of the room, and bang, it hit me, this first epiphany. I looked at the class and said, I want you to describe to me what it would look like if you ruined your life. You know, you're 50 years old, like I am, and you have ruined your life. Describe to me what it would look like. Now, they're high school students, so it would take them a minute to warm up, but somebody would put up their hand and say, I'd become a drug addict. So I'd put that on the board. Somebody else would say, well, I'd fail out of school so I couldn't get a good job and take care of my family. I'd put that on the board. Somebody else would say, well, I'd get pregnant or get someone prematurely pregnant. It might not ruin my life, but it might set me back. Whatever they came up with, I put on the board. Then I said, okay, I want you to pretend that that's your goal, is to ruin your life with those things. How would you start today? Let's start with being a drug addict. How would you start today? Now, again, they're high school students, so it would take a minute for somebody to put their hand up. But somebody would always put their hand up and say, well, if I wanted to be a drug addict, by the time I'm 50 years old, I'd start by smoking a joint after school. And 2 kids would turn red because that's what they did yesterday. Right? I'd say, oh, you want to fail out of school? How would you start today? And then somebody would say, I'd fail the math test this afternoon. And then they'd all look at me like, are you done? I have to go study. Right? Say, oh, you want to get pregnant or get someone prematurely pregnant? How would you start today? And then they'd all blush, and that would be the end of the conversation because it wasn't sex ed. So, So the point was that every single one of those students had hopes and dreams and goals, ambitions for their future. Every single one of them. But every single one of them did things that traded away what they wanted most for what they wanted now. What was easy, what was pleasurable, what was convenient. And then it occurred to me, that second epiphany, that I talked to all these communities. They all had these hopes and dreams, plans. I mean, we have economic development plans and downtown plans and infrastructure plans and recreation plans, and we've got more plans than we know what to do with. Sometimes we need a plan just to manage all of our plans. But every single community I've ever been to has all those plans. But I've not been to a single community where I don't watch people trade away what they want most for what they want now. That's easy and convenient or feeds their ego. And that's what this presentation is about. Because honestly, I didn't write this book to be a bestseller. I wrote it for therapy. I was frustrated by talking to people and watching them do the opposite. And so I started to write down stories. Then I became Minister of Municipal Affairs, and boy, I got a lot more stories. And now I have lots from traveling around North America. So I wrote this book. Ta-da, it's a national bestseller. So there are just a couple of things you need to know. One, I won't name any names. I do it to protect the guilty and the innocent. And two, there are 3 types of people in the room. I don't anticipate there will be type 3s in this room, given the makeup. But the first type, laugh. That's good. Some of these stories are funny. And if we can't laugh at our problems, we can't fix them. The second type of people in the room, they look at me, and I can see they're angry, but they're not angry at me. But they're looking at me like, oh, I know who you're talking about. And when I get home, he's going to get it. Just a joke. And then there's the third type, though, and there might be some of you in here. You need to understand this. The third type look at me the whole time with their arms crossed, looking very angry. And they're looking at me. I can see it in their eyes. They're looking at me and saying, I know who you're talking about. It's me, and I don't like it. I'm telling you right now, none of this presentation is meant to chastise you, condemn you, or criticize you. We all do these things because it's about human nature. The purpose of this is to show you what we're doing so we can stop doing it. I've even done them. My wife's parents live with us. They have for 16 years. If anyone wants a drink after this, I'm in. 16 years. And the other day, my wife looked at me and said, you're being a chapter 8, which is about seniors. And so you'll see, we all do these things. So don't feel bad. If you're angry at me for talking about what you're doing and you resent it, then you're missing the point. If you want to make your community better, stop doing these things and let's get on. Because I believe building community is the single most important job on earth. So, ready? All right. Turn it on. You told me. Thanks. You'll go. All right, chapter 1, forget the water, both the quality and the, thank you for that. Nope. That's okay. Chapter 1, forget the water, both the quality and the quantity. Now, I wrote the first edition of this book in 2010. I wrote the second edition in 2016 because I had lots more experience and more stories, so I changed it up. When I rewrote the book to the second edition, I almost took this chapter out because it occurred to me, why do we need a chapter on water? This is the 21st century. And then we had Walkerton in Ontario, and you guys had Flint, Michigan. Two circumstances that were horrible. You know what happened in Flint, Michigan? A bunch of new politicians got elected that their ego was more important than their citizens, so they pulled out of the regional water agreement because they didn't want to have anyone else controlling what their rates were or the system, and they turned on their old water system and 12 people died from the contamination in the pipes. 13 people, last I checked, had been charged. One of them was the former governor for his role and what he did in that. And then I thought, you know what, that's just one circumstance, one occasion. But then I went and checked, and Flint, Michigan is still in hot water. In fact, Flint, Michigan right now is facing potentially millions of dollars in lawsuits because they stuck with their old system and they have old lead pipes in there. And now potentially thousands of children have been exposed to lead content in the water high enough to cause brain damage. And then I thought again, you know, it's just Flint, Michigan. It's just Walkerton, Ontario. It's just one case. But I went and checked. And for you guys, there are over 300 communities in the United States right now with lead content in their water higher than what Flint, Michigan had at its worst. And every week in the United States, approximately 30 communities are put on boil water advisories. Oh, thank you. Put on boil water advisories because of the quality of their water. Alberta or Canada, we have 10% of the population, 10% of the communities. We're the same. 3 communities a week put on boil water advisories. And I'm leaving out the ones that last for hours or a day or two. I'm talking about the ones that last for weeks and months and years. This is the 21st century, isn't it? Why are we still focused on water? And I used to tell people all the time that the public demands quality water. They don't demand it anymore. They just expect it. They just expect it. And I've had a community actually said, hey, we finally fixed our water issue. It's clean and we're going to market that. I'm like, you're going to market clean water? That's like a hotel advertising they're now bed bug free. That is not a marketing strategy. People expect it. And if you don't believe me that people expect it, then when you go home after this conference, go to your favorite gas station and buy a cup of coffee and hang out by the counter. And you'll hear every single person come by and complain that gasoline is what? $3.50 a gallon here? And yet they will buy a little bottle of water for $1.50 or $2 and not say a word because they expect quality water and they won't settle for less. Quantity of water is equally important. I mean, I grew up on a farm. Anyone who's grown up in agriculture knows the rule of thumb for agriculture. You buy the best quality seeds money can buy. You put them at the perfect depth. You put on pesticides to kill the bugs. You put on herbicides to kill the weeds. You put on fertilizer so that it has enough nutrients to grow. But you know what you get if it doesn't rain? Nothing. You can't do agriculture without water. You can't do value-added agriculture without water. Commercial development requires water. Industrial development requires water. Housing requires water. There are communities right now all across the United States and Canada where people want to go in, they want to buy a plot of land, build a house, start a business on Main Street, raise their family, be contributors to the community, and they can't because we can't supply the community with enough water. And you all saw what happened in California with the drought for a couple of years. You experienced your own dry season here last year that was devastating. If you don't have water, you have nothing. And my grandpa always reminded me, you can go for 3 minutes without air, 3 days without water, and 3 weeks without food, and then you die. You can do without just about everything else. Some of my former political colleagues who have not been through rehab, they say things to me when we get together and talk. They say, Doug, the next world war will be fought over oil. Probably. A lot of wars have been fought over oil. It drives the economy. But I always remind them that the last war will be fought over water because whoever controls water will control everything. So if you want to kill your community, forget the water, both the quality and the quantity. And your community may die drinking from a poison well or die of thirst, but I guarantee you either way, it will die. They're not all that gloomy. Sorry. Deep breath. We're going to get through this. Number 2, don't attract businesses, especially businesses that compete with yours. Now, I said I went to over 200 communities in a couple of years, and I discovered something. If I showed up in my suit, then people would tell me, and I was always at the front of the room like this, right? People would tell me what they wanted me to hear. But when I walked around on Main Street and talked to people, they said the things that needed to be said. And those are two different things. So I spent most of my time with my boots and my sport coat on, wandering around Main Street, and I discovered something. I would go to communities of 1,200 to 1,500 people that had one grocery store. And I would go in and talk to the grocery store owner, and they would always say the same thing. Doug, I don't know if we're going to survive this. I mean, sure, we're okay this week, but it's so touch and go sometimes. I just don't know if we can make a living doing this. I'm ready to give up. But I would go to communities of the same size, 12 to 1,500 people that had 2 grocery stores, and I would talk to those owners, and they always said the opposite. They'd say things like, well, I'm not buying a Maserati, and the kids aren't going to go to Harvard, but we make a good living doing this. That didn't make sense to me. One community with 1 grocery store, another community with the same population and 2, they're doing well, and that one is not. I couldn't get my head around it until it occurred to me that it was competition. Competition gives us price, quality, selection, service, atmosphere, all sorts of elements. It makes our businesses better. So when I would go into the community with 2 grocery stores and talk to the public, I'd say, tell me about your grocery stores. And they'd say things like, well, I go into that one because they have a better price on canned goods. But I go into that one because they have a better selection of produce. But other people would say, I go into that one because they have a better quality of meat product. But sometimes I go into that one because the bag boys carry the groceries out for me. Price, quality, selection, service. But I would go to the community with 1 grocery store, and I would ask the public to tell me about theirs, and they'd say things like, well, I want to shop local, Doug. You're supposed to. We all know that. But sometimes I go in there and go to grab a jug of milk, and it's $2 more than anywhere else I could get it. And it's going to expire the next day. Sometimes I go in there and say, I'm having a barbecue and a bunch of friends over. Can I get some special stuff brought in? And they look at me like, do you think I can afford to do that for you? Sometimes I go in there at the wrong time because the owner's stocking shelves, and they look at me like, oh, you got to come in now? No price, no quality, no selection, no service. So where do you think those people went? They went down the road to the place that had 2 grocery stores where competition gave them better price, better quality, better selection, and better service. Now, I was in a community where I met 2 entrepreneurs. They were young back when I was young. We were the same age, and I thought, this is a cool story. This couple opened up a gas station. I needed to hear their story. So I interviewed them thinking it would be interesting, and it wasn't. It wasn't. There was only one thing that stood out to me that was interesting. They mentioned their hometown was an hour down the road. And I said, well, why didn't you open the gas station there? They only have one. Why didn't you open it? They said, oh, we tried, but we couldn't get the building permits. We couldn't get the development permits. We couldn't get the zoning. I mean, eventually the town wouldn't even call us back. And I asked them, why would they do that to you? They didn't know. So I went to that community, and I wanted the truth. So I didn't just ask a couple of people. I asked everyone what happened. And it turned out everyone knew except them, because they all told me the exact same story. And every single time they looked sad, they looked a little sheepish, and they said, well, the mayor at the time owned the gas station across the street from where they wanted to build and didn't want the competition. Now, because I'd asked so many people, I heard other stories too. Other people related another couple wanted to open a bumper-to-bumper franchise, auto parts shop. And they had the same problems, couldn't get open, so they went an hour in the opposite direction to open it. And I asked what happened to them. They said, well, person who was on council at the time managed the Acklins Granger, another parts store, and didn't want the competition. Now, I'm going to tell you, I heard so many stories from interviewing these people about what they were doing that, well, people started to tell me stories I didn't even ask for. I started to feel like a Catholic priest on Sunday. The confessions were incredible. I literally, sitting in town at a restaurant, having lunch, and a lady came in and sat down across from me and said, can I talk to you? I have to get something off my chest. I was like, okay. The confession began. And she said, I have to tell you that I was the front person at the town office for over 20 years. I wasn't in control of anything. I didn't have any authority, but I was the first person people would come and talk to. And we always had welders come in that would say, where's your industrial land? I want to buy some industrial land. I'm going to build a welding shop. I'm going to hire a bunch of welders. It's good economic activity here. Where do I find it? And she would say, we don't have any industrial land for sale, which was a lie. Or it's environmentally contaminated already. They won't tell you that, but they'll sell it to you and then you'll be on the hook. Or the school's full of drugs and the economy's in a downturn and the housing prices are overinflated, whatever she could do to make them go away. And I looked at her across the table and I said, why would you do that to your own town? And she said, well, my husband was a welder and we didn't want the competition. Now, here's the ironic part. If I could gather you all up, put you like in a crystal ball or something, and take you to that community, I would put up a podium and I'd put you right here so you could watch. I would call a town hall and everyone from that town would show up. And I'd say, do you believe in competition? And they'd say, yes, Doug, we're good business-minded people. We're conservatives, Republicans, whatever. We're business-minded people. We believe in business. We believe in competition, except that's a lie. If you only believe in competition as long as you're not the one being competed against, then that's not a belief. That's a lie you tell yourself to make you feel better. So if you want to kill your community, don't attract businesses, especially ones that compete with yours, and you can have a monopoly on failure. Ba-dum-bum. Huh? Yeah. Oh, we're stuck again. Sorry about that. Number 3, don't engage youth. Now, I'm going to tell you this so that no one asks me this. If you've heard me do this presentation before, you won't ask me. But someone always comes up, if I don't say this, and says, Doug, how do we keep young people in our community? And I picture that I'll go to your town and I'll see young people chained up to mailboxes and light posts so they can't get out of town, right? The nature of youth is to keep them. No. The nature of youth is to go explore, to meet new people, to try new things, to learn new ideas, to make new connections, to experiment with stuff. You hope it's not bad stuff, but that's the nature of youth. Your key to success is not to keep them. It's to let them go and explore, to learn new things, to meet new people, to glean new ideas. Your key to success is then to give them a reason to come home after they're done exploring. That's the whole point. But we don't do that. In fact, not only do we not give young people a reason to come home, we spend half of our time chasing them out of town. I mean, I was doing an event. It was a soup and sandwich event. It's going to talk about redesigning your downtown for the 21st century around socialization and beautification, all of that. It was a short presentation. It was a soup and sandwich event. So everyone, just like this, but a room this size, they grabbed their bowl of soup and a sandwich and came and sat down. And I did what I normally do. I walked around in my boots and my sport coat, kind of coy, and I listened and I heard the conversations and they were all the same. Now, one deep-voiced, powerful man sat in the middle of the room, and I heard him the loudest, but everyone was saying the same thing. They were all saying, we didn't listen to the last fancy speaker that came and told us what to do. I mean, we built stuff downtown, but more businesses are closing. The new subdivision's not sold out yet. No. If people want opportunity, they got to go somewhere else. They got to move to the city. In this case, it was Minneapolis. They said, I tell young people you got to go. I mean, there's no hope here. Now, I finished my presentation. I said, any questions? He was the first one that stood up. And his first question was, Doug, how do we keep young people in this community? My response was, shut up. I was never particularly politically correct. But I said, look, all of you, all I've heard is how there's no hope and no future in this community. You've got young people sitting at the tables with you, and you're saying this, and then you wonder why they leave. Do you not realize you're the architect of your own destiny? You're chasing them out of town and then lamenting the fact that they go? What is wrong with you? Stop being so negative. Our communities are wonderful and we need them to come back with new ideas. But we also don't accept their new ideas. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I've heard people in positions of power say, no. They can be quiet until they're 40 like I was. Then they can take on a leadership role. Said the guy that can't connect his iPad to the internet. I mean, we need now more than ever co-leadership so that young people can talk about how the world is changing and where it's going and what they're looking for. Because different generations have different values. They want different things. We're trying to, in many cases, build a community that worked for us in the 80s, but it doesn't work for those young people. I mean, case in point, I hear people say all the time, these young people don't care about our community. They don't volunteer anymore. They don't help out. No, that's not true. They don't volunteer the way you did. I mean, volunteering 30 years ago was joining an organization, a club, and going to a meeting the third Thursday of every month and having a few beers and helping out the community. The younger generation doesn't do that anymore. The older generation that did that also got a job that they had for 40 years. Then they got a gold watch and they went off and died. It was great. It was like one event. Now, young people today live in a gig economy where they have multiple jobs and they're constantly moving from gig to gig. And that's created an entire new mindset in their world where they also gig volunteer. That's the way they approach it. They don't want to go to a meeting or belong to one organization the same way they don't want to belong to one company anymore. They want to do gig volunteering. And my favorite example was a young man from here in the United States. He was from Colorado. He came into town council and said, I want to clean up the park. It wasn't to embarrass anybody. It wasn't any political motivation. He just wanted to give back, and it was his favorite park, and he wanted to clean it up. So the town said to him, well, you know, that's a great idea. I think you should go do that. Wait a second. We should probably give you the bags, the garbage bags for that. We also, should probably pass some sort of bylaw in the budget to pay for those bags. We're going to need something that, we're going to need to make sure our insurance is good, because what if something happens and you break your leg? So we got to check the insurance. In fact, if we're going to do this, and we're going to check the insurance, we're going to get a budget for this, then we should probably advertise this so other people can come and help and make it sort of a community. You know what? Give us 6 months and we'll have it sorted out. Well, he looked at them and he walked out and he went and cleaned the park up that weekend. Paid for the bags himself. He didn't care. And he wasn't trying to embarrass anybody. He just wanted to do it. And he created a hashtag on Instagram. I think it was Clean My Community or Clean Up My Community. And he took pictures of the garbage bags before, pictures of the park after, and it was wonderful. And it went viral. That's why I love this story, because there were thousands and thousands of young people across Canada and the United States that went and cleaned up parks or found some other thing to do in their community. Give them a cause, they'll go fight it. They just don't want to belong to an organization. And that leads, every municipal council says to me, Doug, how are we going to be effective in the future? I tell them, if you don't learn to be more responsive to younger generations that don't want to wait 6 months for every decision that comes down, the question isn't how you're going to be effective, it's how you're going to be, there's a word, I just lost the word. It's how, anyway, you know what it's 50. It's 50 now. I turned 50. And I've never had a word escape me like that. It's how you're actually going to be useful to the next generation. So you might be irrelevant. That's the word. How are you going to be relevant to the next generation? So hey, if you want to kill your community, since youth is synonymous with the future, just keep chasing them out of town. Tell them there is no reason to be here, no reason to come home, and they'll leave. And because youth is synonymous with the future, when they leave, your future will leave with them. Number 4, deceive yourself. This essentially means having absolutely no idea who you are as a community. And I know it's not grammatically correct. We're supposed to say what about community. I think communities have a personality. So I've seen communities deceive themselves in 3 ways. First, they proclaim they're perfect. In fact, I did some research starting on the West Coast. I stopped when I got just past Colorado because I think I had enough evidence going across North America. And 54% of communities had the same slogan, the same mission or vision statement. The best place to work, live, and raise a family. That's pretty good marketing when 54% of your competitors have the exact same slogan. I mean, that's like a cell phone, Apple saying, hey, we sell cell phones too. How is that valuable? But there's so many communities that do that. And on top of that, the best place to work, live, and raise a family, or work, live, and recreate, or whatever combination you want, is a lie. There is no community that is perfect. And who wants to be perfect? Have you ever had supper or drink with someone who's perfect? Like everything they say is, oh, I did that better and I've done that, I've accomplished it. They're annoying as hell. They are not fun to be around. They are obnoxious. And that's what your community can come across as. And in fact, if you take a marketing class, any marketing class, one of the first things they will teach you is about over-marketing, where you make all sorts of real promises that you can deliver on. And in the effort to clinch the sale, you overmarket, you promise something you can't deliver on. Well, then everything else you said suddenly becomes a lie, and that becomes the story. And yet so many communities, the best place to work, live, and raise a family. Yay. The second way communities do it is that they try and be like everybody else. I have never been so frustrated in my life in the last few years as seeing what communities do with strategic plans. Man, they all look the same. They all have the 5 dimensions of a community, the 5 strategies you need underneath, and then the 5 actions. And you know what you get? You get, we need to engage youth more. The strategy is more youth engagement. The action is engaging youth. How is that a strategy? That's a wish list. Like, I don't get it. And I have actually teach a class at the university on strategic planning. I do it, but I also teach people how to do it. And it's funny because I'll have city managers and mayors and councilors come to take the class, and I tell them all, bring your strategic plan, but rip off the cover page and block out any time the name of the community is mentioned. And then I put them on a bulletin board, and I offer $100 for anyone who can identify a strategic plan that isn't their own. I have never paid. It's been 7 years, and I've never paid a single person because they all look, and the biggest thing is they start looking at the board and they're trying to figure out whose is whose, and they all start to look at each other and go, these all look the same. They all say the same thing. So again, it's missing it. You're trying to be like everybody else. Why would you want to just be like everybody else and get lost in the mix? For both of those, what makes you unique is what makes you amazing. It's the same with people. It's those unique skills and strengths that we have that is what we should market. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be like everybody else. You have to be really good at who you are. And the third way, and I'm going to talk more about, I'll give you some examples this afternoon. The third way I've seen communities do it, lie to themselves, deceive themselves, is try and force their worldview on reality. Now, I guess the party I was in politics was the progressive conservatives. It's kind of ironic and oxymoronic, which is also politics in general. But so that's what it was. So I was kind of progressive and kind of conservative, and so were most of the people. And we were on a broad spectrum. It was back in the days when we used to have drinks or supper with the opposition instead of saying they're trying to destroy our way of life, like there's some war going on. And so we used to chat all the time. And I have seen people say, there's social issues and there's economic issues. We, in fact, 7 years ago started off by doing social, community strategic plans and economic strategic plans, and now we don't separate them because there's no point. They can't be separated. But I hear people still, in my own political circle, say daycare is not an economic issue. That may have been a nice worldview that wasn't very practical, but defensible until the pandemic came along. And then when the daycare shut down or home care shut down, and because a kid had a sniffle and everybody had to go home, which meant half the parents couldn't go to work, it became an economic issue. Our social issues, our cultural issues, and our economic issues are now inseparable. But if we still insist, no, it's not an economic issue, when evidence shows that it impacts the economy, then we're trying to force a worldview on what we think the world should be like instead of actually thinking about real world solutions, which isn't helpful. So if you want to kill your community, deceive yourself. I mean, your community will die. It will. And it'll be just like that body in the morgue, right? The one that has no distinguishing characteristics, no uniqueness about it, no identification, no unique markings. And you know what they do with those bodies? They put a toe tag on them and it says John Doe. But when your community dies, its toe tag will read the best place to work, live, and raise a family. Number 5, shop elsewhere. Every single chambers of commerce in the free world says shop local. Right? And it was even enhanced by the pandemic. We knew how much spending money locally mattered. Great. That was wonderful. Except as consumers, we even nod and say, yeah, we got to shop local and I want to do that, but then we don't. And the reason why we don't, I'll take you through the process. There are 3 phases. If you open a business in your community, and if you've been there your entire life and you open it, this is about you. If you're a newcomer to a community and you open a business, I'll get to you in chapter 11, okay? But if you've lived there your whole life, this is what happens. Phase 1, you invest all your net worth and your equity to open the business. It's going to be great. You're going to grow your own net worth. You're going to employ a bunch of people. You're going to grow the community's economy. You're going to be a good corporate citizen and donate to the football team and the Main Street beautification. It's going to be wonderful. So you open the business. And then all the people in the coffee shop, the most evil place on earth, where nothing positive is ever said and very little truth is ever spread. They start to talk. And they say things like, what a stupid idea. I can't believe they would open a business like that. Our community doesn't have enough money or people to support a business like that. If I buy my stuff from there and then they go broke, who's going to give me my parts? Who's going to service my equipment? No, what a stupid idea. I'm not shopping there. Everyone in the coffee shop says, yeah, that's a dumb idea. So they don't go shop there. And the business goes broke. Phase 2 comes along only if the business didn't go broke, probably got close, but it didn't go broke. It survived that. And then the banter in the coffee shop changes. It changes to, because the business survived that, it gets over that hump and that hurdle. It starts to make a little bit of money. Maybe it even makes pretty good money. And then the coffee shop banter changes to, can you see how much money those people are making? They built a new house in the new subdivision. It's pretty big. They bought a new car. She's got new rings. I saw him down at the golf course. He's got big new golf clubs, that expensive $1,000 driver. I'm not shopping there. And they won't shop there because of those greedy business owners making so much money. And what's ironic is that they'll drive half an hour down the road to another community because they don't have to see that business owner's car or house or golf clubs or rings or anything like that. And that money leaves the community. And that is based on envy. It is the second most evil of all human traits. I'll get to the first one at the end. The second most evil of all human traits. Because imagine it. If I am in the community and you are making lots of money as a business owner, your house is bigger than mine, your car is bigger than mine, and so on. I get all my posse in the coffee shop to stop shopping there and spread the word and no one shops there and you go broke. Yay for me. I don't have to be jealous of you anymore. But your car is bigger than mine, and so is your house. So I'm going to get my posse together, and we're going to get you. Yeah, now I have confidence. So I'm coming after you next, and then it's you, and then it's you. And pretty soon, yay, I'll have shut down every business that has a bigger house or a bigger car than mine, and yay, I don't have to be jealous of anyone anymore. Except what makes anyone think I'm going to have a successful business or even a job left if everyone else goes broke? The nature of community is to hope other people prosper and are successful, not failing. Because if you hope they fail, eventually you will too. The third phase comes along. That's if the business survives. By that time, it either sells to a corporate group that the corporate profits leave town, or it finally goes broke, or the business owner gets so tired of being ridiculed for their prosperity and their success that they leave town. And sometimes leave the business, but sometimes move it. And then everyone in the coffee shop says, what do we have to do to keep a business in this community when they're the ones that chased it out? Now, every single chamber of commerce I have heard says shop local. I have yet to hear a single chamber of commerce explain to the businesses, you need to give people a reason to want to shop local. It's a two-way street, right? I mean, remember which story was I going to tell in this one? Oh, I almost got to the wrong one. Yeah. The guy who owned the gas station, the mayor in chapter 2. Remember I talked about him and how he didn't want the competition? Well, I went to help that community because they said that he was charging, they called it the mayor's gas tax. Like he wasn't the mayor anymore by that time, but he was charging like a 10 cent a liter premium on his gas. Sorry, for you guys, that'd be like 5 cents a gallon. Sorry, it's my Canadianisms. So he was charging like 5 cents per gallon more than anywhere else because there was no competition in town. So they said, we're having a really tough time. Could you help us? So it was easy. I did a basket of goods comparison of all the major things you would buy in the region. And I took it to the Chamber of Commerce and I put it up on the wall and showed them they're competitive almost everywhere except gasoline. There was another thing, but gasoline was the big one. So he was there at the chamber meeting and I said, look, you got to understand, if you could help us out here, people, I've heard them say they feel like they're being gouged by you. So they'll drive 20 miles down the road to another community to buy their gas, but then they also get their groceries and they go out for lunch and they pick up hardware supplies because they're there. And all that money leaves the community. So it's hurting us. Could you help us out? And he said, no, people have a responsibility to shop locally. So I left. What was I going to do? Well, I went through there a couple of years later. And I thought, I'm going to stop in and see how he's doing because I was going by. So I pulled into the gas station and he came out right away. Like, Doug, I haven't seen you in ages. How are you doing? And when I pulled in, I noticed he was no longer a Shell gas station. He was a Racetrack Gas. And I didn't know the difference or why. So when he came out, first thing I said was, I'm good. How are you? How come you're not a Shell anymore? You're a Racetrack Gas. And he said, well, they downgraded us to another brand, a smaller brand, because we don't sell enough volume of gasoline. I said, why don't you sell enough gasoline? He said, because people in this town won't shop local. And as he said it, I looked over and he was still charging a 5 cent a gallon premium on his gasoline. He didn't even realize he was sabotaging not only the community's success, but his own success as a business. But he had no responsibility. It was everyone else. So look, if you want to kill your community, shop elsewhere. It doesn't matter if you're a consumer or if you're a business owner, you have to find a way to make sure every single dollar leaves your community. And then when your community dies, it won't just die, it'll die penniless. Number 6, don't paint. Now, people have said to me before, Doug, you know what? This is cute. You wanted 13 ways to kill your community because it's a bad luck number, but you could only come up with 12. So you made this one up and you stuck it in the middle, okay, hoping nobody would notice because this is pretty weak. I mean, they look at me and say, Doug, it's like judging a book by its cover. It's superficial and shallow. Honestly, a lot of books get judged by their cover, which is why I put this one on. I didn't do the art. I don't even know what it means. It's a guy in a hole with a barn in one hand and a cow in the other and a weather vane on. I don't get it. But it's why, though, I did call it 13 Ways to Kill Your Community, because if I called it Strategies for Building a Successful Community, none of you would have read it. You couldn't have, because I would have fallen asleep writing it, right? We're interested in aesthetically pleasing things. We're attracted to interesting things. So I tell people the look of your community is not just superficial. It actually is an outward indication of whether or not you appreciate your own community. Does it look like people take care of it? Does it look like people care about it? Does it look like people invest their time and energy in doing something to make it a nice, beautiful place? Does it? If it looks like it's run down and deteriorated and dying, people will believe that's the story without ever finding out more, because it will show that projection. And then people go, oh, okay, I get what you mean. We'll have to do some beautification. But I mean, I hopefully people learn and then we don't have to worry about it. Like, no, you missed the point. We are genetically encoded to be attracted to aesthetically pleasing things. It's in our gene makeup. I mean, here is a thought experiment for you. A female cheetah comes out of the jungle into the clearing. It's time to find a mate. And so she sees 2 male cheetahs. This one comes out of the jungle, is it nice hair, muscular, looking really suave, walking with a strut, like successful, right? Wow. She looks at this one, and it comes limping out of the jungle, tail busted, mangy skin stuck to its ribs, pus coming out of one eye. It doesn't look like it's going to survive. Which one is she attracted to? She is not superficial. That other one gives the impression it's going to be successful. And so there is some genetic encoding, some preconceived notions in our brain that tell us when we see something whether we think it's going to be prosperous or not. No one is driving down your main street. Well, maybe no one is driving down your main street saying this place looks like it's dying, but subconsciously they're getting the message that it is. And in fact, they've done experiments where they took the exact same meal and they have served it in 3 different places. A cafe type place, a brew pub type place, and a nice fancy French restaurant. The exact same meal. And the majority of people, like I don't mean 60%, I mean 90%, in every case, ranked the meal in the French restaurant better, said it was a better quality meal, it tasted better, and they were willing to pay more. Because of the impression. They didn't know why. It just gave them that impression that it must be better. And your look of your community sends the same message. But hey, if you want to kill your community, don't paint. Don't paint. And your community can die an ugly death. Number 7, don't cooperate. I think this, I would say, is the plague of the 21st century for communities. The lack of cooperation. The reason why we don't cooperate is because of our egos. And I can tell you exactly how devastating this is. As a brand new politician, I was sent then to go watch an event happen. There was a major agricultural processing firm that was going to locate between 2 communities that were 17 miles apart. Each of those communities had almost 2,000 people at the time. A long time ago, they had 3,000 people, but they had 2,000 people at this time, and I was just sent as an observer. So the CEO, she called a meeting. She said, I want to gather both the towns. So it was a venue much like this. And everybody was excited. She said, we are going to build our agriculture processing facility here. It's going to be amazing. We're going to create so many jobs that neither of your communities are going to be able to absorb it alone. Like one of you can't handle it. You both are going to grow. You're going to have new people. You're going to need new houses, new recreation facilities, expansion to your schools. But we want to make sure that you share the taxes so you can both meet those needs, because we don't want fighting about that. So decide how you're going to do that, and I'll be back in a couple of years and we will start building. I need to go do the engineering and get all the paperwork done. So she left. Now, I don't know who did what to who in 1922, but for some reason, those two communities have hated each other for 100 years. Now, it's Canada, so I think somebody hip-checked somebody in a hockey game, and they've had a grudge ever since. Because I asked them, they couldn't even remember why they hated each other. One of the communities wrote a letter to the other one's newspaper and said, we deserve this. So the other community wrote a letter to the other one's newspaper and said, we deserve this more. So the other one responded by saying, you guys are a bunch of crooks. And the other one responded by saying, no one's going to want to live in your community. And they were criticizing each other for a year and a half. They actually sent her letters. And I saw the first two. The first one said, don't do business with those people because they're a bunch of crooks. They'll lure you in, then they'll jack up the property taxes and gouge you because they're crooks. So they responded. Well, I don't know if they responded. They wrote their own letter and said, well, don't do business with those people because their housing prices are overinflated, their school's full of drugs, and no one's going to want to live there. So do business with us. Now, I don't know why the CEO showed up a year and a half later, but she did. She called another town hall meeting, and everyone showed up again. There were young people and seniors and semi-retirees and professionals and business owners and family people, and the room was full. Only this time, there was a 10-foot swath down the middle like this that divided them because they'd been fighting for a year and a half. So they refused to associate with each other. And it was crazy. She said, what have you worked out? And I was sitting right over there. What have you worked out? These people stood up and said, we're better. We need this. They said, we need this. Then they started to attack each other and say why the other one was worse. I remember calling her a couple of years after and saying, it was sad to watch grown adults yell at each other like that. She said what was worse was that it only took 8 minutes from the time she finished speaking, 8 minutes for them to be standing up yelling at each other. And when she stood up and they all sat down, like, oh, she's going to pick a winner. I hope it's us. This is going to be good. And I was there. The only thing she did was stand up, look at them and say, what in the hell is wrong with you people? We're going somewhere else. And she walked out. And I asked them, what happened? And they said we couldn't get enough support from the province. We couldn't get them to help us coordinate. But I went and did some research. And back in 1922, when they were each 3,000 people, they fought so vigorously over a new business that it left. And every business and industry that came to the region since then, they fought over, hoping not that they would get it, but that the other one wouldn't get it, because it would give them an advantage, and chased every single business away. And you know what? One of those communities now is just over 500, and the other one's just under 800. And if you ask them what the problem is, they still don't think it's them. They still don't realize that they're not competing against each other. They're competing against the rest of the world. And it's not just business. I worked in a community. We were supposed to do a regional economic development strategy. And I said, sure, I'll help. It was 5 towns and a county. And so they had a regional fire service agreement where they all came together for one fire department, one fire service. And it was that way for 20 years until a bunch of egotistical politicians, and I can say that because I was there, as a politician, I mean, not. And that they got elected, and then somebody said, my taxpayers paid for that fire truck. Someone else said, well, my taxpayers paid for that fire hall. Someone else said, well, you're not telling my firefighters what to do. So it all fell apart, and they all had their own little fire departments, lost all the professional firefighters because no one could afford to pay them because they were small communities, and were down to volunteers. And they said, what can we do to get this back together? And I said, well, give me a day or two to think about it. So I did a little research. Out of 5 new fire departments that were existing, 5 departments, only 3 of them had people that could drive the fire truck, because you have to have a license to drive the fire truck. Only 2 of them had anyone on their fire departments that could operate the fire truck. Like if I went to I don't know what valves to turn or how to manage the pressure, only 2 of them did. And one of those departments only had 1 volunteer firefighter who knew how to do it. And none of them had any fire rescue training in case someone was stuck in a house. None of them. So it was easy. I called a meeting of all of them, and I said, if you have a fire and someone dies, you're all going to go to jail. And if you don't believe me, look at Flint, Michigan. And they were like, no, we can run our own stuff. I'm like, your egos are not what you're supposed to be working for. It's supposed to be your constituents, and you've all forgot about that, the people you serve. So you will go to jail. And then I talked about Flint, Michigan, and it took 6 weeks, and they had a new fire service agreement. It was great. But they let their egos get in the way and their competition get in the way instead of working together. And why do we do those things? Because of lines in the sand. Municipal boundaries that were drawn, here it would be 120, 130 years ago that those lines were drawn. What was the world like back then? Wyatt Earp. I mean, we rode horses to go to town, to take in our goods and to bring out more supplies. Our education was based on how long it took kids to walk to school and walk home in one day. Our healthcare was based on how long it took a man, because it was always a man back then, to come out with a little black bag and say, well, you're going to die, because what were they going to do with a little black bag? That's the way the world worked, and our boundaries were drawn because that's as far as politicians could walk or ride on a horse to go see people. The world has changed significantly, and yet I see people fight about this constantly. I, in fact, was doing a little regional economic development group with 2 towns in the county, and a guy from the county, after I was done my presentation about collaboration and cooperation and economic strategy, stood up and said, Doug, you say those people from town are our friends. They're not. They are our enemies. They want our money, our tax dollars for new pools and new streetlights and new sidewalks. They're not our friends. And another guy from the county stood up and looked at him and said, doesn't your mom live in town? So I have a presentation. Now it's called I've Seen the Enemy, and it's my mom. So if you want to kill your community, don't cooperate. Remain fiercely independent, and I guarantee you will die alone. Number 8. Whew, making progress. I'll go fast. I know time. No, but I was telling too many stories. Sorry. Number 8, live in the past. So there are 5 acronyms that cover this. I need you to understand that for each of these acronyms, the people get a little crazier, okay? So 5 acronyms for people who live in the past. NIMBYs stands for Not in My Backyard. You've all heard of them. My example about them is these people aren't hard to deal with, but I've seen communities that say, okay, we need to build seniors appropriate housing, condos. They find the plot of land. They go look for government grants. They go look for direct private investment, something that they need to build. They do the assessment of the community. It takes a few years. Well, they found that plot of land. They plant some trees and some grass because they read chapter 6. So they want to beautify it a little bit while it's sitting there instead of a pile of dirt. So they get it all ready, and it's really nice. A few years go by, and they're ready to build. And then they say, we're going to build the seniors complex there. And then people go, no, that's my backyard. That's my green space. So you go from green space to green space. People go, look, I know you need seniors housing, just not here. And so in many communities I've been to, before I get there, it winds up over at the railroad tracks where nobody wants to live anyway. And those people aren't crazy. They just want their backyard where they picnic and they walk and they sit there with their family. They play catch with a football, that kind of stuff. So they're not impossible to deal with, just challenging. The next group you have are the bananas. Banana stands for build absolutely nothing anywhere near anything. Bananas. Now, I was in a province in Canada. They invited me. They said, our community's kind of dying. Our main street's dying. Could you give us a hand? We're not sure what's wrong. So I went into the community and I did an assessment. The assessment, I said, demonstrated that they needed affordable housing. Now, that was my fault because it was a really nice community. I mean, the average home price was over $600,000. No one could afford to live there unless they were very wealthy. So I said, you need affordable housing. And as soon as I said that, a bunch of people looked at me and said, we don't want affordable housing here. You know who gets affordable housing? They have too many kids, too many dogs, and they don't mow the lawn. We have a brand and a motif here, so we're not doing that. So I left. A couple years later, they called and said, it's really bad now. Our main street is significantly dying. Could you help us? So I did another assessment. This time I explained it differently. I said, you still got the same problem, but here's the situation. People commute from other communities to come here to work on Main Street in those businesses. They can't afford to live here, so they commute. You've seen the price of gas now. They don't want to commute, so when they get a job in their hometown, they stay there. Now those business owners are very wealthy. They live here, they live in $1 million houses, and they don't want to work 50 hours a week. So if they can't find employees, they shut down. That's why your Main Street's shutting down, and it's significant. So you need housing affordability and diversity. That's an important difference. Because a diversity of housing creates affordability instead of government subsidies. You can have one-bedroom apartments. That's housing affordability, not necessarily affordable housing. So your labor pool will reflect the diversity of your housing. I'm going to talk about that later this afternoon. So you need diverse housing to draw diverse labor to keep your Main Street robust. And they looked at me and said, no. So I left. I mean, that was it. And it's ironic because most of Main Street is closed down now, though it's a beautiful place to live. Nobody can afford to work there, even though they can afford to own the businesses. And now people are leaving. I did interviews with them. They're leaving because you can't get shampoo there. There's no restaurants. There's no place to eat. So they don't want to live there. So they're all moving away. And most of the houses are for sale now, which means the price of housing is declining. So they're going to get affordable housing, whether they like it or not. That's why I call them bananas, because that whole stagnant mindset was bananas. The next ones you have are the CAVES. CAVE stands for Citizens Against Virtually Everything. And those folks, I was doing my MBA a few years ago, and I volunteered for this community. They had a budget crunch, and they said, I'll do a project. I want to help you with your budget. So I did some number crunching. This community had an office open Monday to Thursday, and 2 people working there. I interviewed those people. They didn't need the job. They were wonderful ladies who more were doing it because there was a job and they were there to help the community. They got paid well, though, because they had to. So I said, what if the office was only open Monday and Tuesday, and you only work those 2 days? They didn't need the money. They were fine with that. So great. I had my solution because that would exactly offset the budget shortfall, balanced budget. Then I did the public meetings you're supposed to do. So I talked to people about it, and people went, well, I don't really want that, but I understand you got to come up with something. So, okay. Now, the CAVE people don't come to those meetings. They only come to the last meeting where you have to finalize it. That's when the CAVE people show up, the Citizens Against Virtually Everything. So 2 of them showed up and said, no, you can't do that. What if I have to go into the office on Tuesday? It's like, go in on Thursday, go in on Monday. They're like, no, you can't do that. You got to stay open Monday to Thursday. I was like, well, okay. So I guess we could raise taxes a bit to keep the office open like that. And they said, you can't do that. There are too many seniors in this community. And families. We're on fixed incomes. You can't raise taxes 1 iota. Like, okay, so I can't cut and I can't raise taxes. I'm going to have to go find another solution. And they said, you can't do that. We have to have a solution now. This is a crisis. So I couldn't do my solution. I couldn't do the opposite solution. I couldn't have no solution. And that's what cave people are. I call them cave people because they see the dark. They live in the dark and they refuse to see the light. Like you can turn them to take them out of the cave and they'll run back in deeper and farther than ever before because they only look for the darkness, not the light. They're afraid of it. Cave people. Number 4, the 4th group are the Nopes. Nope stands for not on planet Earth. Now, I have no issue with religion whatsoever, okay? But here's the fact. Religion is based on faith. You can't prove it one way or the other, so it's your faith. Great. I'm fine with that. But we've got to the point now where we want to let our faith stand on issues that do have facts and evidence. And that is deliberately ignoring reality, ignoring evidence, ignoring science in favor of what you want to be true. Well, that's just dumb, to deliberately be ignorant of reality. Yet, I've seen people on both sides. I mean, I have friends, conservative friends still, who say, you know what, Doug, this climate change stuff is a hoax. Forget it, it's not man-made. I'm like, okay, well, let's say it's not man-made. Fine. It's still the climate is changing, and we need to make sure that our kids can grow crops and feed themselves and that they're not dying in heat waves and floods and tornadoes. Like, the climate's changing. And they're like, nope, I don't care. Doesn't matter, there's nothing we can do about it anyway. And that's their answer to everything is nopes, which is why I call them nopes, right? And that's their response. That's ignoring some evidence, some reality. But on the other side, because I have an honors degree in philosophy, specializing in environmental ethics, I'm an environmentalist. I don't know why conservative and conservation, they're from the same root word. I think they should go together. So I tell my environmentalist friends, we need a transition strategy. We need coal, which we have a lot of in Alberta, to still build to run the smelting plants to make the steel that builds the windmills, right? We don't want them all made out of trees or that would be devastating. So we need some coal. And they look at me and go, nope, leave it in the ground. I'm like, but how do we even make more windmills if we don't use coal? Nope, leave it in the ground. Well, that's just dumb. Both sides are dumb. Reality is in the middle, but that's what nopes do. They look and say, I want this to be true, so I'm ignoring reality. That's why I call them nopes. And the last group are the most devastating. You need to understand the first four groups will tell you why they're opposed to something. Okay? The last group is not satisfied with that. They also need to make sure everyone else in the room is also opposed. And they do it, well, I call them fears. Fear stands for fire up everyone against reasonable solutions. And they do it by spreading fear. I was in a community, it was a situation much like this, and we were going to talk about the future of the community. We're using a tool called Poll Anywhere. I hate when consultants do sticky note exercises because it takes weeks to get feedback and they fall off the wall and they have to categorize them. We do 60 questions in 60 minutes. They appear, everyone logs on with their phone or their computer, you vote in real time, and it's great because then you can get immediate feedback on the community about what the future is right there. And what's cool is that I hear people say, everyone in this room agrees with me, but then when the poll's taken, it turns out they don't. And it helps check our ego a little bit that we're the only ones thinking, or we're the only ones that matter in our thoughts. So it helps. So we use this tool. So I had everyone ready for this community enterprise, 300 people in the room. I had the town council lined up here. I had the Chamber of Commerce lined up here, and I was excited. I got to the front of the podium and said, everyone's logged on, let's go. 60 questions, 60 minutes. And the guy at the back of the room stood up and said, I won't work with council. They lost $56,000 of taxpayers' money in a corrupt deal. Taxpayers' money! I won't work with them. They're corrupt. And walked out and never came back. I was like, thank you for your valuable contribution. Let's move on. And so I went to move on, but then I realized the room, the noise was getting higher because people were talking. What $56,000? Who made this decision? What deal was this from? When did it go wrong? How come I haven't heard about this? Who got the money? And so I was like, uh-oh. The room's getting noisy. So I ran over to the mayor and I said, what's he talking about? And the mayor said, I have no idea. So I said, you better tell people that. So the mayor got up in front of the audience and said, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know what he's talking about. We have no knowledge of anything like that. Well, you know politics in this day and age. People said, liar, cover up. What are you hiding from us? Tell us the truth. And the room, I thought someone was going to shoot him. So I sat him back down because people were really angry. I got everyone calmed down and said, I will find out the truth. Except by the time I got people calmed down, our 60 minutes was up. So everyone left. We didn't do one question, which is what he wanted. No talking about the future. Now, half the people in that room left and followed him to the coffee shop and said, you're our guy. You keep these crooks honest. We're going to follow you. We're going to listen to you. And that's what happened. Now, I found out the truth. He was kind of telling the truth. Council had invested $56,000 in a high-risk, high-stakes adventure because they were desperate to kickstart the community because it was about to die. And so they took this chance, and it didn't work. They lost the $56,000. It wasn't corrupt. Nobody snuck away with the money. Nothing like that. It was just a decision they made to try and move the community forward. Also, he left out that it happened in 1972. Yeah, it was the same year I was born. It was 50 years ago now. I mean, I went and checked, and everyone who was on council and part of that decision was dead. There wasn't even anyone left alive to say, I'm sorry, but he didn't want an apology. He wanted people to be distrusting of the leadership at the front of the room. And it worked. And he went away, and all those people followed him to the coffee shop, and then he felt empowered. So he actually started to spread more half-truths and more rumors to keep people angry. And he realized with this following, he decided to run for mayor. And he ran for mayor. And he created Facebook pages and Twitter accounts and social media stuff to spread the half-truths. And when he ran out of those, it was outright lies. And when you guys caught on to what he was doing, he made up something awful about you guys and told them, and then something awful about you and told them. So you were so busy fighting with each other, you didn't even know he did it. And he continued to push his way to power. People predicted he was going to win. They told me that on the last night of the last debate, a young lady stood up and said, I don't understand you. You are tearing this community apart. You are sowing division and ripping us to shreds with these evil, awful stories for what? So you can be mayor? And he made up something about her personal life right there on the spot. And half the room that were his followers said, yeah, I heard that about her. And the other half looked and said, what in the hell is going on? I don't get this. They didn't know what was happening because they weren't organized against him. They were just there to listen. And he lost by 3 votes. Some people think I'm telling an acronym about Trump. I'm not. I'm telling a story about an actual politician in Texas. But politicians are using that more and more, and that's incredibly dangerous. They spread fear to gain power. So if you want to kill your community, just let any of those 5 groups have the podium, have the mic, have the floor, have the audience, and have the power, and they will make sure you spend all of your time talking about the past and what's wrong, and not about what's right, and then your community will not only live in the past, it will become part of the past. Number 9, shout out your seniors. Oh man, I'm so sorry. Sorry. I get so excited about the stories. And number 10, shout out your seniors. Everyone thinks that seniors are this cordial, easygoing group. They're dangerous. They are. I mean, they are the first community builders. Most of our communities, they were built over the last 60 years by those folks. And lots of times they didn't have government grants or programs to help. They just did it themselves. I call them the STPs, the same 10 people, right? They sit on the Chamber of Commerce or the Economic Development Alliance, on the town or county council. They run their business. They work 2 jobs. They coach football and they put the chairs away at church. Like they're the same 10 people that wind up doing everything. They're community builders. And once you're a community builder, it's in your blood and you're always a community builder. And so lots of people think, oh, they're old, they're going to go die. No, they're about to live. They don't have to work all those jobs. And I mean, yeah, they get the grandkids, they load them up with sugar and they kick them back to mom and dad. And then, yes, I know that when they retire, they want to travel, they want to golf, they do things like that, but they don't do that forever. And they don't do it all the time. And so they come home and they want to still be a community builder. So lots of great communities have organized them so that they can socialize and give to their community, which is what they want to do. But I have actually heard people say, no, if she comes back, everyone listens to her, she's very much liked, so I don't want her around. It's my turn to be the boss. And so they keep them shut out. And then what do you think those seniors are going to do? I mean, my grandpa, when he retired from the farm, he went to a little place south of Phoenix, Arizona with his girlfriend of 25 years. My grandma died before I was born. I didn't want you to think he had a wife and left her and took the girlfriend, okay? So they would go down there, and the reason why they picked this community is because it had square dancing, right? Square dancing. And they loved it. I went down there. I didn't see the charm, but they loved it. When they couldn't go down there anymore and they had to stay in Canada, they didn't come back to the farm in my hometown. They moved to a little community called Viking. You know why they picked Viking? Because it had square dancing. And that's what they like to do. Now, I have people look at me and go, I'm not doing that. They could do it on their own, but I'm not making them have a quality of life. I don't care. But even those people feel guilty. And I've heard them say, well, we do need seniors appropriate housing so they have a place to live. And they get it built. And they think that those seniors will go in there and play shuffleboard and crib until they die. No, they'll sneak out. They will, and they'll go volunteer, and they'll spend money, and they'll contribute to their community because they're community builders. If you really want to kill your community, you've got to make sure they don't even have a place to live so that they have to go somewhere else. They'll take their money and their love and appreciation for your community with them, and then your community, since they are the foundation, when they go, the foundation will crumble, and your community will come down upon itself. Number 10, reject everything new. I also like to call this, no, I can't tell that story, so I better not call it. Sorry, I'm just going as fast as I can. I'm making it sound like it's my own guilt because I'm going too long. Reject everything new. Okay, keep your thoughts within sight of the water tower. I also like to call it that because I have heard I've been at events where people have presented ideas. You present a great idea, something that's never been tried in the community before. And then I know that the community's gone nuts, crazy, when the first response to it is, but we've never tried that before, as a response to why it shouldn't be done. That's the point. I mean, insanity, Einstein described insanity as doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results every time. But I can't tell you how many communities have done that. There are rural development institutes all across North America, in just about every U.S. state and every province, where they celebrate examples of what communities have done. You can research a community that's like yours, similar to yours, and see, I bet you there is a community somewhere in North America that has solved every single problem in isolation. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You just need to try something you haven't done before. A friend of mine, we went to university. We both failed out our first year. We had a lot of fun. I got back into college the next year with plans to go back to university. And he went for a holiday we call it Reading Week. You guys call it spring break. And so he's like, I'm going to go down to the U.S. I'm going to have a party with these spring breakers. It's going to be fun. but he didn't realize spring break started the week before, so he only had the weekend overlapping. So when they left, he was there for the rest of the week. In this community that had, all the university students left, and so there he was. And he wandered around town by himself, and then he realized the community was the same size as his hometown, and realized there was a business on Main Street that was doing really, really, really well. But his hometown didn't have that. So he said, I'm going to open that business. He came back, cashed out his tuition, got most of it back, went to open the business in his hometown, put his name on it, and it was a huge success. It was a huge success. And he keeps doing that over and over by finding communities where there's a unique business that's prosperous and then opening it in 2 or 3 other communities. And I drive a Jeep Wrangler and he drives a Jaguar or something. Now I stayed in school, he quit. Just no regrets, just thoughts. And I remember asking him, what motivated you to do this? He said, well, I remember our parents used to tell us all, learn from your mistakes. Our profs used to tell us, learn from other people's mistakes. I just thought, why don't I just learn from other people's successes and skip the mistakes part? And there are communities that will tell you how they overcame a challenge or a problem. They'll celebrate it because that's part of their marketing strategy. You don't have to do something that no one's ever done before. Just try doing something new for you to change your course of direction. Because otherwise, if you keep doing what you've always done, you'll always get what you always got. Number 11, ignore your outsiders. Outsiders are a group of unique people that deliberately picked your community to move to, right? They did it on purpose. They looked around and they moved there for the environment, for the jobs, for the economy, for the churches, for the school, for the housing. I don't know. Everyone has their own reasons. But when you find out those reasons, it tells you one of your competitive advantages, what drew someone outside. But we look at outsiders and we say, no, you're not from around here. You don't know how we think. In fact, I was in Prince Edward Island, the smallest Canadian province, beautiful postcard place. And I was doing this presentation, and when I was done, a young lady, and I didn't quite do it this way, but a young lady, well, she was young, I was young. She's now the same age as me, but I don't want to say an old, how do you say that now? So anyway, she stood up and said, I'm not from around here. I'm an outsider, just like you talked about. They have a name for me, and I'd never heard it before. She said, they call me a come from away. I'm like, they don't even sugarcoat that. They just say, you're come from away. And so I said, what's it like? And she said, well, and her friends are sitting beside her. And she said, I suggest something and they look at me and they say, well, you don't know how we think. You don't know how we do things around here. You don't know our history. You don't know what we like. You wait until you're a local and then you can contribute. I said, that's unfortunate. How long have you been there? And she said, 26 years. And actually, I did research across Canada. I'm sure it's the same in the U.S. in rural communities. It takes 3 generations to be a local because your parents have to have been born there. So you move there, your kids are still outsiders, but their kids can finally be local. 3 generations. And why? Outsiders picked your community on purpose. What's the resume for being an insider? I fell out here, I guess I'll stay. How is that a qualification just because that's a birth certificate, not a statement of credentials? And yet lots of us are like, nope, we know it better than you do. So they picked it on purpose. You didn't. You just didn't leave. But we push these outsiders to the outside, to the fringe. Even outside thinking. I remember sitting in the coffee shop at the Senate with my dad when I was a kid, where all the smart farmers were all talking about how the world should be. And 2 young guys came in and said, we want to grow canary seed and mint. And they looked at them and said, we grow wheat and barley and canola, and we have Black Angus cattle. That's what we do here. And they got laughed at. And they left, and they started growing mint. And now Alberta is the number 2 producer of mint in the entire country. And canary seed is still a cash crop that a lot of farmers rely on. So, outsiders have a different way of thinking, a different mindset, even if they're from your own community. But those outsiders make us feel uncomfortable. And so the best thing you can do is to push them away. Keep them off council. Keep them off economic development authorities, chambers of commerce, and anything else. Make them feel like they're outsiders, and then they'll leave. And then your community can have the inside tracked on failure. Number 12, grow complacent. This is a simple tortoise and the hare argument. You know the story of the tortoise and the hare, the turtle and the rabbit, right? I mean, the turtle challenged the rabbit to a race, and the rabbit said, I'm going to win this easily. So they started, and then the rabbit was so far ahead, lay down to have a nap, woke up, and the race was over, and the turtle had won. A lot of communities do that. They grow complacent. They assume they're so far ahead they can't possibly fail, or they make a little bit of progress, and then they lie down and have a nap. And I've seen it so many times. Communities who are usually doing it want a sustainability strategy. I don't have any problem with sustainability, but every person I've ever interviewed that wants a sustainability strategy doesn't mean sustainable, they mean status quo. They want things to stay just the way they are, except it never happens that way. In fact, all it takes is one business in your community to close, and that's 13 jobs gone. That's 13 people without jobs, families probably without jobs, and those people, those families have to leave to go find a job elsewhere. That's less kids in your school, less utilization in healthcare, less volunteers in your community, less money spent. 13 families not spending money could cause another business to close, which is 13 more jobs gone, which is 13 more unemployed families that have to go somewhere else to find a job, which is less kids in your school, less utilization in healthcare, less volunteers, less money. You see how it starts to spiral out of control? So I tell people, don't use sustainable. Just to make sure that they're not meaning status quo. I tell them use words like vibrant, dynamic, aggressive, enterprising, anything that says you're going to do something about your community. Have a vibrant, dynamic entrepreneur policy. But put powerful words in there that say you're going to do something instead of just be sustainable. Then when you're doing something, when a business closes, you may have another one open and then you're here. If you're really lucky, a business doesn't close, but a new one's opens. That's 13 new jobs. That's 13 new families that could move to your community to take those jobs. More kids in your school, more utilization in healthcare, more volunteers in the community, more money spent. 13 families spending money may cause another business to open, which is more kids in your school. You see how it spirals up? So if you really even want to stay here, you have to work really hard at it. There's no such thing as status quo because the world is ever changing. But hey, if you want to kill your community, lay down and have a nap. It'll become a dirt nap. Ooh, that's the harshest one yet. I'm not sure if I like that one. Still trying, still experimenting with it. And the last one, don't take responsibility. It's that simple. Oh, I'm going to say something else about it. We confuse the word blame and responsibility all the time. So I hear people say all the time, I'm not responsible for the decrease in the price of oil. I'm not responsible for the fact it didn't rain. I'm not responsible for the governor's policies or the stupid president or the United Nations. I'm not responsible for that. Wrong. What you mean is you're not to blame for those things because you didn't do them. You're still responsible for what you're going to do about them. I mean, look, if you and I work together, I'm your boss, and out of the blue after a year, because I'm kind of a jerk, I fire you for no reason on a Friday afternoon. What are you going to do? You're going to go file a human rights complaints for improper dismissal? Are you going to go buy a bottle of bourbon, which I recommend? Don't drink the whole thing, and if I would even come over after I fired you and have one. Though I wouldn't be invited, I know. Are you going to go find another job? You're not to blame for what I did. You're still responsible for what you're going to do about it. And so even these things are outside your control, you still can figure out something to do. So if you want to kill your community, the best thing is to pass on responsibility to somebody else. Blame the governor, blame the president, blame a teacher, a preacher, a doctor, a dentist, blame the kids that are playing football out on the streets during the day. I don't care because it really doesn't matter. The only ones responsible for your community and its future and its success is you. And you. And you. All of you. I mean, in all the time I've been doing this, which is 25 or 30 years now, I've discovered, including in politics, that a group of people that believes it can do something cannot be stopped by any government. But a group of people that believes it's meant to fail will find a way to prove themselves right. Every single time. And so now, if you feel a little bit inspired, we're going to talk more this afternoon, I know, but for this message, I want to wrap up for you. If you get a little bit inspired and you say, I'm going to go do something, you're going to go back to your community and you're going to have people say it won't work, it can't be done, it won't happen. And you're going to want to get angry at them. Anger is the most evil of all human traits. I've never seen a person make a good decision when they're angry. And anger begets more anger. Anger. I mean, I'll tell you this right now. When I was younger, there was a lot of anger in my family, and so I grew up kind of an angry person. I'm not anymore, if you hadn't noticed. And I grew up kind of angry, and I noticed that I would go to work one day and I would hit the pothole and I would almost get hit at a stoplight, and then I wouldn't get the promotion, or I wouldn't get the committee I wanted, or I wouldn't get something done, and I'd be really frustrated and angry, and the governor would be mad at me about something, which I worked under 5 premiers, governors. They were all mad at me at one point or another. That was my claim to fame. I could piss them all off. So I would be angry, and I would come home, and I would hit the pothole again, and I'd pull into the driveway, and I'd see the garbage cans, and I knew my sons didn't take the garbage out, and I'd be angry, and I would go in and say, damn it, boys, I told you to take the garbage out. Right? I was already angry. Anger looks for more anger. But when I had a good day, and I was in a good mood, and everything was rolling nicely, I'd pull up on the driveway, I'd see the same garbage bins, and they hadn't taken the garbage out, nothing had changed, but I go in and say, boys, come on, you know this is how you get an allowance, take the garbage out. Nothing changed except my approach to it. Anger begets more anger, and we don't make smart decisions when we're angry, so don't be angry. When those people look at you and say, it won't work, it can't be done, it can't happen, don't get mad. Look at them and smile and say, those who say it cannot be done should not interrupt those of us who are doing it, and then carry on. And if you need a hand, give me a call. Thank you.